unfortunately, in this era that we're in of large language models and being able to scale and develop content in a way that we never could in the past, the opportunity is real. This is not like, fictional fantasy type stuff as far as showing up on ChatGPT or showing up in those AI overviews. It's changing the game. Ask those questions on a regular basis, whether it's a monthly call, whether it's a check-in, just, hey, what did you A/B test this week or this month? And what did it tell you? How are we then actually taking action on those insights? If you don't hold your agency or your team accountable and ask that very basic question, chances are is that there might be some complacency that you certainly would want to put a stop to. Hey, this is Reid Wicoff, CEO and co-founder at Digible. Today in another session of Riffing with Reid, I'm going to be going through some more marketing principles. Set myself on this voyage a couple weeks ago of 100 multifamily marketing principles. And as a reminder, these marketing principles really are opinion of one, not necessarily reflecting what our account management team, who often is who you hear from, or others at Digible necessarily believe. But hopefully more often than not, you see some connectivity there. But it's, just a chance for me to lay down what I feel are some important, truths or principles in how to approach or think about marketing in this industry. So the purpose of this and this podcast in general now is it's kind of an extension of Digible Dudes, or spinoff, if you will. It's just to teach and learn publicly about the rental real estate industry, naturally with a focus on what we know best, which is multifamily marketing. So it's really meant to share that knowledge and then also hopefully start some meaningful conversation and even stir the pot a little bit. So if you have comments, questions, by all means, drop them in Spotify, hit me direct, but would love to hear from you. And let's get going with what will be 11 through 20. So probably going to be doing this in tranches of 10. Not sure that I or listeners can stomach much more of it than that. So rather than recap the first 10, you'll have to just tune into that episode if you want to pick that up. But I'm going to just dive in. And one more reminder, I'm approaching it this way. I don't know if this adheres to like the classic, definition or way of thinking about principles. But I've been doing the start, stop, and continue model, and it's no way when you're doing 10 to have the perfect spread on that. But I'll try and sprinkle a little bit of starts, a little bit of stops, and then some continues based, again, on either data that I've been exposed to or anecdotally, what I'm hearing directly from our clients or what I'm hearing inside the walls of Digible. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the stops, pun intended, I suppose. But number 11, stop budgeting like it's 1999. And not all my references, whether it's movies or songs, really land. Picking up a little bit from Prince there. But what I mean by that, so when I say stop budgeting like it's 1999, unfortunately, many... and I'll say less of our clients, and I sincerely mean that, but I still hear about a lot of marketers, owners, and operators that I'll say kind of hit the easy button when it comes to budgeting in this industry for their marketing expenditure. So they might use a per door approach, which is to say, hey, it's $1.10 or whatever per unit, and that's how we just quickly back into what the advertising budget's going to be, and then you just see kind of this line across the 12 months. It's like, so have at it, do the best you can. Versus acknowledging the fluidity, that obviously is in a supply and demand industry. And in particular, when you're in, let's say, a distressed market, God knows when you're at a lease up, which is more, of an aggressive budget. And so you may see a higher budget, but you often still won't see much change or volatility between one month to the next. And it's just not reality. And I know it requires a little bit more effort, and I'll say more collaboration, whether it's internally or whether it's working with an agency like ourselves. But your budget should be far more dynamic based on the inventory. And I'll say not just your occupancy, but even at that unit level. So as you're seeing 2 bedrooms, fill up, or if you're stagnant, with a 3-bedroom, et cetera. I mean, don't need to spell all the different floor plans or possibilities out, but your budget should indicate that. And so just encourage you to stop hitting the easy button, lean into the dynamic nature of leasing, and you're far likely to see better results and obviously a more efficient return on your ad spend. So moving on to another stop. This one is almost a 1B, but this is pacing campaigns evenly. And so while more of the industry seems to be plugging into, through integrations, dynamic ad copy and pricing, so that you're using the example just before, but if you no longer have 2 bedrooms available, that you're not actually advertising for those. But in the event that you are, and you do have inventory, I feel like you shouldn't necessarily, over the course of the month, have the exact same pacing, which is to say how much you're spending each day. There are certain constraints through Google, as well as some of these other platforms, on just how dynamic or fluid you can be with that. But let me give you a simple example of in this scenario that you are marketing a lease up, and you have thrown the kitchen sink out at the market, and you've created a lot of interest in that asset, and you are getting flooded with inquiries. And I will put an asterisk by this in a second, but why then, if you have created and been successful in generating a lot of demand and interest for that property or even specific floor plans, would you just, again, draw that line flat through the month and say, we're going to have the same amount of spend every day, every week, within a month or a quarter? It just doesn't make sense to me. I would capitalize on that demand. And so that's, again, where you need either an agency partner or the capability internally to react to that, where it's like we accomplished the first goal, which was to really gain interest, excitement about this asset. Now let's take advantage of it. And if that means that we had earmarked $5,000, or maybe it's $10,000, combination of digital and ILS for that month, that we actually may front load that so that we don't miss those opportunities. The second part of this that I think is really fascinating, and we've been learning a lot more ourselves here at Digible with our call analytics, is thinking of kind of a strike zone as to when the leads are coming in, both by which day, but also at what time. And if you do that over the course of a month, even a week, you'll start to see some patterns. And I don't think this isn't breaking news per se, but maybe many of you have not actually seen that data in the form of like a heat map or a strike zone on how many of your leads are coming in after lunch, before lunch. Certainly the leasing teams can tell you anecdotally pretty quickly, hey, this is when we usually get, the biggest volume, or when we hit our dry spots. But to really map that over the course of several weeks, if not several months, again, don't pace your campaigns then regardless, or, ignoring that data. I would leverage that fully as much as you can, and you're just going to continue to be more and more efficient, prescriptive, and get a better return on ad spend, ROAS, if you will, in your dollars. So first thing is don't, at the beginning of the year, just spread it equally. So that's number 11, stop doing that. And then part 2 is get kind of a click below and really think more as you have more data telling you, hey, these are the days or these are the times. It's the beauty of digital marketing. Something not to make comparisons to other platforms or options, but that is the beauty of digital advertising and digital marketing is you have so much agency, so much control over when and how you advertise, and certainly the content itself, even that you're putting up. Don't miss those opportunities. Take advantage. So another stop, this is number 13 as we're going through 11 through 20, assuming that your agency in this case, but it could be even your internal team. But this is a point a little bit more at agencies, is doing A/B testing. And so hopefully the majority of people listening or viewing this are very familiar with A/B testing and digital advertising. But very simple, in one campaign, you're measuring the impact or response rate. It's a certain ad copy or certain images. You could use the example, which which was an interesting one for us, of pools and amenities versus floor plans. And this is something I expect is still true, but a couple of years ago we did this for a few of our clients and discovered that floor plans, which was a bit of a surprise to us, was actually showing a much higher engagement rate than what we were seeing with, I think it was Infinity Pool or something. But it's understandable that maybe coming from the marketer or even the owner, but hey, we want to show, what it's like to live here. Some of the coolest things, that we have is this infinity pool, or we have this new gym that we just invested in, and that's what we really want to showcase. However, it doesn't always turn out that's what's driving response rate. And so in the case of that test I just referred to, floor plans, even though not the sexiest thing to necessarily put up in a social media campaign or even, in a YouTube, video, we're creating far better actions that we're actually turning into, meaningful leads. And it's not to say that's always the case, but the point here, just giving you that reference, is that it is critical that you are consistently doing those types of tests because they're not usually going to turn out the same from one asset to the next. Even in the same submarket, you may see different results. But I have a feeling that many marketers, especially when they're hiring agencies, and understandably so, just have this expectation that is an ongoing thing. And I would tell you to stop making that assumption and actually ask those questions on a regular basis, whether it's a monthly call, whether it's a check-in, just, hey, what did you A/B test this week or this month? And what did it tell you? And how are we then actually, taking action on those insights? So pretty basic, but if you don't hold your agency or your team accountable and ask that very basic question, chances are is that, there might be some complacency that you certainly would want to put a stop to. All right, so moving on past those stops, we're now at number 14. I'm actually noticing I think my numbers might be a little off here, but is what to start. So covered the three stops, so that's going to be budgeting like it's 1999, pacing your campaigns evenly regardless of what's going on with your inventory, and then assuming that your agency is doing the A/B test. What I encourage you to start doing is educating yourself about fee transparency. This may feel like a bit of a right turn, but probably not too much given the amount of conversation, I'll say right now, that's happening around this topic. But for those that don't know, similar to airline industries, the event entertainment industries, it's not fully federally now regulated legislation behind this, but it seems to be coming very soon if you're paying attention to the industry news and updates on this. But it's critical that you're now disclosing full transparency of any fees related to a lease. And so I'm not going to go too deep on this. This is more of a compliance PSA, as far as the start. But what you certainly don't want is to be caught flat-footed, whether it's with an owner, an operator, or not be able to have an impactful or meaningful conversation with an agency about it. So it's good to know, hey, what's kind of your default? What's your position? Are you doing the total monthly leasing price, or is there a different way? And then do you have any data or information on, what the different outcomes are depending on how we approach this? But I think more often than not, total leasing monthly price is the way to go. I think that's becoming clear. But if you're approaching it a different way, just make sure that you're within, the compliance or you're complying with the states, because the number of pieces of legislation now are pretty mind-blowing. I think last time I heard there's 40 or 50. So it's varying, and different states are coming online, if you will, with kind of stricter or clear policies around this. And it's just really important that you stay in front of that. All right, so another start. If that was a right turn, I guess this is a left because it doesn't really connect to that. But is benchmarking and evaluating your data at a property level. And what I mean by this is often what you'll hear, and I don't know if it's wrong to use the word guilty, but I was going to say Digible has been guilty of this in the past, is we often in our reporting will talk about industry benchmarks. And, for us, the reason that was so important early and still is, and I'll get back to why the property benchmarking is so critical, is we want to provide context. And I'm sure most agencies operate this way. with any reporting, any data we're putting in front of you. Otherwise, it is just data, right? It doesn't mean much, especially to an owner or an operator. A marketer might get it and say, hey, I have enough experience with search campaigns, and I can tell you that that's not good, or that's amazing. You guys are knocking it out of the park. But it becomes way more meaningful when you have benchmarks, let's say at a market level, and even going below that at a sub-market level, so that you really feel like if you're going to measure and bring in other data, that it's accurate, it's meaningful, it gives you some good direction. But I take it one step even further. I do think it's great, and ideally you can get some benchmarking at that sub-market level. Again, that's what you should be shooting for. But at the property level, I think a good comparison, and those that haven't heard on the podcast, I'm a pretty big Peter Attia fan. He wrote the Outlive and has super popular podcasts around mental, physical health and whatnot. But one of the things he said that stood out to me that I think is meaningful here as we talk about benchmarks is just that many general practitioners and internists, their treatment plans for patients are based on benchmarks, industry-wide healthcare benchmarks. And the problem in that, if it isn't the light bulb not already turning on, is we are like, whether it's your age, whether it's your current kind of baseline as far as your weight, it can be ethnicity. There's a lot of different things. Actually tons of different variables that go into the nuances, the individuality of our makeup as humans. And so our biomarkers are the best example of that, but they're so different. And so if and I think his example was around diabetics, but somebody is, pre-diabetic or is predisposed to potentially get diabetes, and they are at 130, it might have been 136, 135 on their blood sugar levels. That for somebody that's not predisposed would be like, hey, you're fine. And that internist or general practitioner would just say, move on. We're not going to worry about that. However, if you are predisposed, that is actually not an okay number for you. I'm not going to go much further, but hopefully painting the picture of like the importance of, and the same is true when it comes to properties, is that it's almost like biomarkers or blood work where there are a ton of variables. And if you just accept industry benchmarks and sometimes even market level or sub-market, you could be reacting too quickly or not reacting quick enough to what the data is telling you. And that's the value ultimately of benchmarking the property level. And so when I say that, I just mean, you need to be baselining, especially a stabilized property, but because there's a lot to learn as you're going through a lease up stage, through the stage of that. But even with that, what's the month over month changes? And, what are the different metrics? Because you can follow too many or follow the wrong ones, even if you're, trying to spotlight or isolate. So you really got to come with an open mind and really drill down and spotlight that asset and continue to measure, and then you'll really know what kind of progress you're making. And I think you'll also have a better idea of what your expectations should be with that asset over the course of a year or two, and then, eventually further out. So hopefully there was enough of a connection between what I was saying as far as humans, blood work, biomarkers, etc., and then thinking at that individual level for an asset. I'm going to stand by that one. All right. So moving on, another start, and I think my last start here is following the page views. So start following the page views, little play on following the money, I guess. What do I mean by that? What I mean by following the page views is I think there's a lot that you can obviously dig into when it comes to Google Analytics on a property website. But perhaps one of the most valuable ways to look at your Google Analytics is to break them into segments, 3 very simple buckets, which is extremely common when it comes to retail sites, I'll say. And that would be your awareness, consideration, and decision, and or you could say conversion. So those three buckets. And if I were to say, how would you approach that with Google Analytics for a multifamily website? I actually believe for those that have some familiarity, they probably get it right or come to some alignment with what I'm about to share pretty quickly, because it's actually pretty obvious in a great way. There's the pros and cons, I'll say, of multifamily websites. Many people, I think, kind of roll their eyes or can get frustrated when they talk about them. Just they're so cookie cutter, they're so similar, and simple. So it's like, how do you really distinguish between one to the next? And then there's just not that much content, which is all true. But here's the beauty in that. Here's the way to take advantage of the simplicity. I won't say the similarity, but the simplicity of a multifamily website and looking at the analytics. Spotlight those page views and think in those buckets of awareness, consideration, and decision. So with awareness, what I'm referring to mostly, and I'm going to keep this very simple, is homepage views. So again, page views is just, to make it crystal clear, is just the amount of times that page has been visited. There's a lot more that we can and maybe will come behind this as far as going beyond just looking at the page view metrics. But for now, stay with me. And then if you were to ask yourself, and you might include something like neighborhood perhaps in that awareness, but even when you get to neighborhood, I start to see it moving into more consideration. Because the second that I've moved from the basic homepage, which is just almost usually a brochure, right, of the website, of the asset, then I am moving into more consideration, because now I'm taking the next step, right, the effort of actually looking past the homepage and now spending some time trying to understand a little bit more about what the differentiators are, what makes this property, or what would make this property interesting for me, meaningful. And so that's when you start looking at, again, potentially neighborhood, but definitely amenities, and floor plans. Those are three big call outs. Then you have somebody that has moved past, again, awareness and is into the consideration phase, which is great. You need a good, healthy portion there, right? Then the last part of that, which is where many of us focus the most, is, okay, what about conversions? Am I actually, is the website taking them all the way through so that I can, build some lead flow? And that's going to be things like your contact us, just who's going to go to the contact us page that's not, at that point of looking to make a decision or in a conversion. Location, that's another one. Those often are either on the same page or, under the same, group. And then schedule a tour, etc. Things like that. So again, I'm not going to go too far, but I can't, because it is that simple with multifamily websites. And so what do you, if you're on board with this and you're getting it, it's like, so now what? What do I do now that I've segmented that? Well, that is going to be one of the most informative things for a marketer to understand as far as the health of their lead flow and their pipeline. So if you're noticing when you do segment that and baseline, back to like what I was just saying as far as for that property, that you have, let's say 20% of your page views are in the awareness, 40% are in the consideration, and this is atypical. I think that puts me at 60. So then I'll say 40% are in the decision. Is that what success looks like? Is that what you're aiming for? And it has so much to do, frankly, on what does your inventory look like? And it also has to do on what you've been able to map or see, historically, like what these trends tell you. But I think it's so powerful, because then you can partner with your agency or put that expectation on them and say, hey, is 20% what we're aiming for when it comes to awareness? Because ultimately, how many people are leasing an apartment and not going to the website at all? Happens more these days than it did ever before, but it's still overwhelmingly going to be almost a prerequisite, right? To get a lease, you should know that they are going to get on that website. And so therefore, you should be asking yourself, how can I be capitalizing, fully leveraging this data, but maybe in a simpler way. And I think this is a great method for that. And then once you start to calibrate and realize it's like, oh, I actually consistently need 30 or 40% in that awareness, a bucket of page views. And my sweet spot for the middle on consideration is somewhere around 30%. And then that leaves me with 30% more on the decision or conversion. So, lean into that, ask questions about it, but I think it's a super smart way to segment and then connect it to the actual leasing data. And you probably are going to have a far more informed strategy than what you had before. All right, now dropping into some continue buckets. This one, I wish I had more to say about it, but I'm still going to add it as a continue, which is to be asking about ChatGPT and the role in the renter journey. I am putting in big all caps and parentheses, but be patient, because unfortunately there is still a lot that is unknown or is being figured out. When it comes to the role of ChatGPT. It's not the only other option out there, but it's the one that we get asked the most about. It's like, so how many renters are now using ChatGPT instead of Google in order to start their search, or maybe even as they're getting further into their search? So where is it falling right now in that renter journey? And then how many people are actually using it to locate an apartment? And I just really don't even, I wouldn't trust myself or any data right now to say that you can latch on or say it's 5% or it's 10%. I think it varies so much depending on the market. The good news is, I suppose, that the population, the renter population, often we hear we want young professionals, is very active there. There's no doubt about that. And you may have also read or heard that there's a growing possibility that they, like many of the other big tech companies, will be bringing an ad platform to their model. I've seen as early as next year. Others say it's going to be further out. In the meantime, though, what do I do about ChatGPT? Should I? Is there anything I can do? The answer is yes, and I encourage you. Did another riffing with Reid session. Not sure if it's published yet, but where we really went deep as it relates to geo search, those AI overviews, and how to best position yourself. And the obvious is content. Content. But what type of content, and how do I need to whether it's the schema or optimize that content so that I have the best chance for ChatGPT to potentially pick this up, or even on Google, as you're seeing those AI overviews and you have the 4 to 5 links, that I would show up there. And so really, maybe the simplest way to put this is the more prescriptive, the more detailed, the more specific, the better. And fortunately, in this era that we're in of large language models, and being able to scale and develop content in a way that we never could in the past, the opportunity is real. This is not like, fictional fantasy type stuff as far as showing up on ChatGPT or showing up in those AI overviews. It's changing the game. And I think I mentioned that podcast. I'll say it again. This also could change the pendulum as far as how much focus is put on content, and we'll call it more organic versus paid in order to generate leads. And so I think, we are just seeing the first signs of this, but I would not wait. I would definitely start asking those questions, continue asking those questions, I should say, about ChatGPT and how to, not get left out or, get too far behind when it comes to your approach to that. All right, moving past ChatGPT, another continue for me is, I'll say, marketing through the whistle. So I just love hearing this, and it's not as talked about as much as I feel like it was a few years ago. When I think about the conferences, and so much, of course, rightfully so, is about AI right now. It has been data privacy, compliance, but several years ago, what was a pretty frequent topic was, how do we market, or do we, after a lease? What's the responsibility? What's the ROI of continuing to market? And what I mean by that, this is not about nurturing, like CRM nurturing, lead nurturing, etc. I'm talking about literally after somebody signed the lease. is the marketer's responsibility absolved, and now that's all on the property management or property manager on-site team to retain. And I think a lot of it falls there, but I also believe, and that's why I'm saying continue to find ways, and a lot of this is going to be through social media, continue reminding people of why they chose that place in the first, or why they chose that asset in the first place. And I hope it doesn't, I wouldn't expect with most of the people listening or viewing this that would sound strange or funny, but it's something that I worry a little bit about because of all the conversation around these other macro trends and focuses, that we might lose sight of that. And I just encourage you to put plans together, to collaborate and work with the on-site teams to say, hey, what is the kind of consistent drip that we're going to be of marketing, and I'm going to keep saying reminders of all that this asset provides throughout the course of their lease, so that, here's the important part, and we don't have to work that much harder on renewals, or finding people for those that do churn or move on to a different place. So many of the larger, it seems like, PMCs have said, or made the move of kind of the Marriott Bonvoy. We hear that a lot, trying to really build up that top line, or the PMC brand. And that's one of the methods of doing this, is like, hey, what's the experience of working with a Greystar, a Willowbridge, a Bozzuto, et cetera, and Avenue 5, that's the method. Is like, that's us marketing through the whistle, continuing so that, it's really that brand. But in many cases, you might not either have the scale for that, the leverage. And so therefore you should be thinking more like, regardless of, the PMC, how do I market through the whistle for that specific asset? And I think that's something that you just have to spend some time on, and it will pay dividends if you collaborate, connect with that on-site team, and build some strategies there. Again, probably a lot of that's going to happen through your social media channels, but not exclusively. All right, so marketing through the whistle. The last one was asking about ChatGPT. Now I'm going to bring up one that would be really interesting, I guess, to see whether this would create more people to raise their eyebrows, or whether they would be nodding their head like, yeah, exactly. Like, we need to be focusing on differentiators. So I put this as a continue, but I'm also going to say it's a bit hit or miss from what I can tell on how much in the process for us of onboarding campaigns, we really hear those clear differentiators. And this is no picnic, so I'm just going to acknowledge up front that, in Class A, it's one of the hardest things, and it's been that way for forever, right? Is we have two properties. That one across the street has more or less the same amenities, same price point. How do we carve out, really, communicate those differentiators? But I can tell you, you can't let go of that battle. And so that's why I'm saying continue, because I know it's an effort. And again, sometimes I hear more than others, anecdotally, like how clear that is for us as an agency when we're working with different property management companies, and more specifically, those local brands on what the differentiators are, and then how do we bring those into our marketing campaigns. It's super difficult when it comes to search, right? How do you establish, other than things like price and perhaps location? There's a few things that you can probably express as far as differentiators, but you really want that continuity. It's like, so asking yourself, what is the unique selling proposition, but the unique value proposition that this building provides to a prospective renter, right? And I think if you give yourself that time, which I know isn't easy, time is precious, and a lot of people say, hey, I've got 20, 30, 40 different properties, getting to that kind of granularity and really fleshing out the differentiators is just super difficult. Put that burden on the agency, if you're working with one and you don't have time to get to it yourself, but it is worth it. And then once that's established, once that's clear, and this is more of a cliffhanger for the next session, I encourage you to build what I call message houses. And that's a terrific way, even in a crowded, highly competitive space or submarket, buildings, to really understand what your differentiators are. And then you build this, again, call it a message house, but it's basically a brand house of these really powerful kind of facts slash differentiators that you want showing up everywhere. So if somebody goes to your website, boom, you have those headlined. If they're seeing a YouTube video, if they're seeing you on TikTok, some of those, even, listen to Spotify, or even in some of your search copy and for sure on Meta and some of those more common social channels, that continuity is there. It's like every time that because as we know, multiple touch points, right? They are going to experience you. Could be on Zillow, could be on apartments.com, various, just all sorts of platforms. You have to know the differentiators, and you have to consistently surface those, find ways to express those in your campaigns. It makes a difference. Just project, think that you're going through the journey. If it all just blurs together and it's not clear, then, you have far less likely chance of converting that lead. What I think more commonly happens is you have marketers, owners, property managers that are trying to break through the clutter, and do that with imagery, do that with video, with, and not that that's wrong, but if you were to choose between just, kind of the aesthetics, if you will, the creative design and imagery versus clearly carving out, your differentiators, which one would you choose? For me, differentiators every time. So keep that in mind. And I'm saying continue, but as I said, I also worry because so much conversation, chatter, focus has moved away from this. Some of those basics. I mean, this is kind of the whole back to basics, which isn't usually my jam, but that I think we're overlooking this, perhaps too much. All right. Well, I have this feeling that, again, my math might have just been a little bit off, but I am still going to call that a wrap. That was either 9, but perhaps 10 more principles. I'll hold myself accountable when I review this, or our producers will. But I am still on track, I think, on course to get to that 100 by the end of the year. Hopefully you find this helpful, and if you have questions, comments, like I said, would love to hear from you. Drop it in any of the channels, or hit me direct, reid@digible.com, and would love to keep the conversation going.